Hello, you lovely ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mings. A little while back, I asked you guys, what is the thing you are hoping for the most with the next Fire Emblem? What is the one thing that would make you the most excited? And what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to go over the top voted responses to this posts to get a bit of a feel for what my audience wants with the next Fire Emblem game. So first comment that we're going to be reading here is from just Crazy Dick, good old Crazy Dick, and he says, good story, no monastery type of activities that take longer than a map in the story. And I wholeheartedly agree with this take. I feel like the My Base feature of Fire Emblem is just one of those mechanics that have suffered from severe bloat as of late. The concept of a My Base was introduced in Fire Emblem Fates, and I thought they did it fairly well there. It never felt like it was super oppressive. It was just a little something to do in between games. But then, as we moved over to Three Houses, it started to seriously eat up maybe more time than the gameplay itself. I'd say a regular playthrough of Three Houses is at least 50% Monastery, if not more, and it started to get real tedious. Engage took a bit of a step back in this regard, but the Somniel still started creeping up on you a lot as the game progressed, to the point where I had to start using mods to disable the Somniel in order to start enjoying the game. And once I did, I actually started enjoying the game a lot more. It feels to me, though, that in the next Fire Emblem game, we're definitely going to see this come back a lot. I feel like they have gotten it into their heads that people really like a My Base feature, and they have to cram it full of minigames. I think out of an insecurity that regular Fire Emblem will not be enough for the modern audience. They're like, oh, well, they can't seriously just have fun with Fire Emblem. They also need to fish and to pet dogs and to go around gathering little MacGuffins. And again, it just signals a lack of faith in the core Fire Emblem gameplay that I think is the reason we all fell in love with the series to begin with. I don't necessarily mind the My Base feature that can be there, just have it be more like the Path of Radiance base. Just have it be something you do in between battles, a little bit of things to do here and there, people to talk to. Sure, if you want to go around, run around, talk to NPCs, that's okay with me, you can do that. Just don't let it eat up more than half of the game. And yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with Crazy Dick here. This needs to change. Sev says, treat the story seriously with fleshed out world details. Tellius was peaking the lore and story department of the nations and their backgrounds. Yeah, the Tellius games definitely were when Fire Emblem peaked in terms of world building. Ever since Tellius, we've struggled to get back to that. And I think a big reason behind that is I think modern Fire Emblem game designers just don't see the value of having a strong world. They think that what people care the most about is just having lively, colorful characters that are cutesy and that you can ship together, and the world building is secondary. We don't need a strong world building in Fire Emblem. It's just a, fantasy world where you go and fight dragons and you cast spells, but nothing could be further from the truth. I think one of the reasons why Three Houses was so well received was because they at least made an effort to flesh out the world of Fodlan. In my opinion, it's not the strongest world by far. I think it kind of feels like, budget FE4, FE4 at home, Timu FE4, if you want to call it that. But I'd take Timu FE4 over what they did with Engage, which was just shafting the world building and not putting any effort into it at all. You need to have continents that don't just feel like memes, the continent of Fightia, where they fight each other, the continent of Pegasusia, where they fly on Pegasus Knights. Or where Pegasus Knights fly on Pegasus. Pegasi. the world of Desertio, where they live in a sand nation, and the world of, Dark Evilia, where they worship the Dark Dragon. It's so lame, and it takes so little effort. And all I want is just some effort put into the world building. It's not hard. Just hire someone who's enthusiastic about this. And stop hiring that same old lady who's been working on the game since Fates. I don't know her name. She's that lady that is responsible for all of the modern writing in like the past 3 or 4 games, and she's awful. Just get new writers. Crafting a meaningful world is so much fun. Speaking as someone who's done it myself, it is so much fun to craft your world and have it come to life and try to make it make sense and have units that feel like they could actually inhabit this world. And we really seriously need to go back to that. The Lead Elite says, return of Manakete/Laguz type characters. When you think back to the first Fire Emblem game, the very first one in the series, it had Manaketes. In fact, I feel like Manaketes is the one thing that sets Fire Emblem apart from many other generic fantasy games. Units that transform from humans into dragons is kind of the core of Fire Emblem, in my opinion. It's always what the series have revolved around, at least at first. And then, in modern Fire Emblem, we've started doing this lazy thing where we introduce dragon-type characters, like Flame, or Vale in Engage, and we say they're dragons, but we don't bother actually giving them a draconic form. So Elir, the main character for Engage, is a divine dragon, but we never see their divine dragon form. And I feel like this is just incredibly lazy. This just seems to me like the developers didn't want to bother actually putting in a dragon form for these characters, and instead just say, oh, they're dragons. Trust me, bro. Like, they really are. They just look like humans. It's Sephia from Engage, for example. She just doesn't... She's a mage dragon, yet we never see her dragon form. We do see some dragon forms, like Sombron, for example, but I think that this is something that really needs to change. Manaketes, and even like Laguz characters, I do like them, but I don't think they are as integral to the Fire Emblem lore as Manaketes are. But we need to go back to traditional Manaketes, like Tiki. Manaketes have always been at the core of Fire Emblem, and I feel like one of the reasons that modern Fire Emblem feels like it's losing itself a little bit, identity-wise, is the fact that we have completely neglected to include the things that made Fire Emblem, like moving away from the weapon triangle in the traditional sense. Sure, Engage brought back it introduced the break mechanic, which is okay, I like that, but I still feel like we should go back to the standard weapon triangle, we should go back to, standard Manaketes, go back to the things that made Fire Emblem, Fire Emblem. Sidna Spada says, character customization. Hear me out. And the reason why Byleth, to some degree, and Elir sucks so much to people is because they're treated like an avatar character, yet we can't even customize them. At least if my avatar was customized to my preference, they'd be more tolerable. That's why I really liked Corrin at first, because even Corrin was a bad character, at least they looked good being dumb. Yeah, this is something I know my wife agrees a lot with. Like, one of the reasons why Robin and Corrin felt better to use than the later avatar that came after them is because at the very least you could make them look the way you want it. You could make like a blonde Robin with a ponytail, or you could have short brown hair, you could have black hair. You could customize them, not like to an insane degree, but you could customize them at least a little bit to look something like what you would look like in a Fire Emblem game, which is the whole point of a self-insert. I am of the opinion that we should just do away with avatars entirely, but I understand I am in the minority. So if we're going to have an avatar, can we at the very least have a customizable avatar? It is so annoying that they take these modern avatars, Byleth and Elir, and they just let us change the name and the gender, and somehow this is supposed to be a self-insert. That is so lazy. I can't even in good faith call that an avatar, because it's not an avatar. It is just a character that you can choose the name and gender of. And if that's going to be the case, you might as well just do away with it entirely, because when you do it that way, it actually creates a lot more workload. You need twice as many voice lines for your voice actors. You also need twice as many cinematics. Tree Houses and Engage literally has to do double cinematics to account for male and female Byleth. And that has to be a drain on the game's budget somehow, because we know cinematics are pretty pricey to make. So yeah, I really wish they would just do away with that. Wholeheartedly agree. Speedwing says game mechanics revolving around resource management. It says a bunch of other stuff too, but I'm not going to read all that. So Speedwing and I may not disagree on a lot, or we may not agree on a lot of things when it comes to Fire Emblem. He likes Reva, for example. So that should tell you everything you need to know about him. But we do agree on this. Resource management is the best way to play Fire Emblem. At least that's what I think. Now, I know a lot of people are going to come into the comments and be like, but Mengs, I like grinding in my Fire Emblem. And that's fair. I'm married to one such person. My wife, when she plays Fire Emblem, she can literally attack a unit like 100 times to level up. Like that's the stuff she'll do when she plays Fire Emblem. She'll spend like 3 hours in the arena leveling up a character to max level, and this is how she enjoys playing the game. And I get it. I'm not going to come and try and take that away from her. But what gives me the biggest dopamine hit when I play Fire Emblem is resource management, is knowing that everything is limited and that I have to conserve my weapons and that I have to treat my experience like a resource, you know? Do you give the kill to this unit or to that unit? This is why I loved Conquest so much, because Conquest was literally a game about resource management. And I thought it was such a genius thing what they did back in Fates, where they basically released 2 games, one for casuals and one for hardcores. Like, they were like, okay, Birthright is for the casuals, grind to your heart's content. But here's Conquest, a game where you cannot grind to your heart's content, unless you get the DLC, which... But I really wish they'd move more into that direction again, where they actually cater to both the hardcore people and the casuals. Because I don't want to take away the fun that casuals have, grinding and tainting. We all love a little bit of taint in our Fire Emblem, but man, the joy of properly using your resources and knowing they're limited is something that really triggers a dopamine response in my brain. And I'm sure some of you guys here feel the same way. Just knowing that, okay, we can't squander our resources. We have to treat these weapons like the valuable commodities that they are. I wish we could go back to that. I really do. I wish 2500 says Treehouses, not houses, did a good job with Chez. They were a main part of the story, but the story wasn't revolving around them from start to finish. I hope there'd be no avatar system at all, but personally, if there is, I'd want it in a similar vein. Yeah, this is the thing that Axum, aka Fire Embrose, he keeps saying the same thing, that Chez is the best avatar in Fire Emblem. Speaking as someone who never played Three Hopes and really have no interest in playing it, I only have Warriors footage in the background because I think it's appealing to look at. I cannot confirm or deny this, but I have heard a lot of other people say this as well. And I think one of the reasons why people like Chez is because I think people just treat Chez normally, because Chez is just a mercenary. And that is a big part of why the avatar works well. I think one of the biggest issues, biggest problems that you can do with your avatar is make them into some kind of divine figure like Alear. A lot of people will often tell me, Mengs, why are you so upset with people treating Alear like a god when Alear literally is their god? That is my problem with Alear. It's not the fact that people treat Alear as their god, because it makes sense for them to do so. My problem with Alear is the fact that they made the game's avatar the religion of the universe they are in. And as a result, they have to fawn over them. That is the problem. So if you are going to make an avatar, just make him or her like a dude or a dudette. Just make him a merc. Or merc. I don't think merc is a word. A merc. Just like Ike. That way, when people meet you, they're not going to go like, oh, you're the divine swordsman of awesome power. Like, they're just going to go like, hey, dude, you're just a merc, shut up. And that is way more immersive than being treated as some kind of religion. Do says, I know a lot of people are saying a good story, but knowing the community, and I mean this with no ill will, I promise, no matter what kind of story comes out, I feel like 50% of the people will still call it bad or trash. Other than that, I'd love to see the return of more varied objectives in each chapter, similar to Radiant Dawn, especially in Modern Fire Emblem. So to the first part of your comment, I actually think that's untrue. I don't think people are going to be trashing the story regardless of how it is. I just think the story has been trash in most Modern Fire Emblems. But if you go back to Echoes, I don't recall people trashing the story of Echoes. I mean, I recall people making some comments that, oh, it's a little bit annoying how Alm is like the chosen one, which he kind of was in the originals. That's not even like deviating away from the story. I know some people, there are issues like Celica being stupid and trusting Jedha. Like, yeah, there's problems with the Echo story for sure. But I think overall, the Echo stories is pretty well liked. I think if you did like a poll on like, you poll like 1,000 Fire Emblem players and you ask them like, do you think the story of Echoes was bad? I think most of them would say no. It's actually quite good. So no, I don't think people are going to call it trash. I just think we haven't had a good story in a while. Echoes was like the last example of Modern Fire Emblem actually putting effort into their storytelling. And as a result, Echoes is one of the most beautifully presented games, I think, in Modern Fire Emblem. The problem is that game is just not very replayable, and it was kind of released as a remake towards the end of the 3DS lifespan, so it kind of didn't do that well. But I still think it's a really beautiful game, and I'd love to see that reattempted in a more modern setting. To your second point, varied objectives. Oh yeah, this is something that Modern Fire Emblem needs to stop, like, lacing about. I hate how almost every single Fire Emblem chapter in Modern Fire Emblem is either route, cease, or kill boss. Those three. Couple of defense maps thrown in there, but usually very few. Not enough, if you ask me. Not enough. I mean, engage. I'm trying to think engage. One defense chapter? The Brodia one? Are there... like, I might be wrong here, so do correct me if I'm wrong. Is there anything Is there any other defense maps in Engage rather than that one chapter in Brodia? And then it's literally just route, kill boss the rest of the way, I think. Now, look, route and kill boss is probably the best way to play Fire Emblem most of the time, but it gets very tedious when it's literally every map. I think it's important to try and spice up your objectives without making them too oppressive. Now, I'm not saying you need to have green units, like escort green units every single map. I understand that gets tedious, but just, I don't know, man, just some little bit of variation here and there would be nice. It doesn't take much to create unique objectives, and it's important to vary them a lot. I think Fire Emblem should definitely do a better job in this regard. Donlot says, either a return to FE10 Berwick style, grander story with likable characters and an actual world, or a simple but fun little story akin to GBA and DSFE. Wow, Donlot advocating for Berwick. What a shock. I do agree though. Donlot has usually a lot of bad takes, but this is a good one. And he says, return to an FE10-ish art style, no more VTuber character casts. Hard agree on that one. Tellius is by far the most gorgeous art style we have ever had in modern Fire Emblem. I don't know if it's fair to call it modern anymore. It's like 15 years old, I think, at this point. But still, it is such a gorgeous game, and I really wish we could go back to it. And he also says another thing here, more playable units, better implementation of permadeath again, more deployment slots. The roster of Fire Emblem games has been shrinking steadily. I think the last time we got a big roster was Radiant Dawn, and that was a little too big. It had like 90 playable characters. Maybe a bit too much. But most of these new Fire Emblem games, they have like a roster of around 30 playable characters, which I just don't think is enough. 30 playable units is, you're scraping the bottom of the barrel, I think. And I think the issue, the reason why we were doing this in modern Fire Emblem is because so much effort goes into each character now. Official art, cutscenes, voice acting, supports. There's so much work that has to be done for each Fire Emblem character in modern Fire Emblem that you just don't have the time to flesh out a lot of characters. So they stick with around 30 characters. I think we need to go back to like 40 to 50 playable units, but put less effort into each of them. I think voice acting is a big reason why this is happening. I don't personally know how much it costs to hire voice actors, but it is an expense. And if you have to voice like 50 support conversations, then that is a lot of work that needs to be done. I just kind of miss Fire Emblem games. Like, one of the reasons I like FE6 so much is because it has a big roster. I think it has almost 50 playable characters. And it just gives you so much variety. Every time you do a new playthrough, you can have a completely different team. You can try some of those less used characters that are a bit obscure. I love that. I love playing with obscure, less used characters. I think that is one of the joys of playing the older games, is that there's so many characters that are almost never used because they're kind of bad, because they didn't really know how to design units back in the day. But finding those units and finding out that they may have a niche that you didn't know, and then maybe you get like a blessed unit. That is what makes Fire Emblem fun for me. That's why I like the older games. And I feel like with modern Fire Emblem, we don't get that as much because, again, just less variety overall. Please give us back at least like a 40-plus roster game. Even if it means they get less individual support conversations, I actually think that would be a good thing. But I don't think that's going to change, considering how most Fire Emblem games are nowadays. The promoted level 20 green unit says good old arena where you gamble your golds, like more gold and experience. When was the last time we had the arena in Fire Emblem? I think it must have been New Mystery of the Emblem. Yeah, I don't think it was ever seen after that, was it? It wasn't in Awakening. No, yeah. We haven't seen it forever. The good old arena where you enter with a unit, you pay money, and you fight a random opponent. If you lose, you die. If you win, you get like twice the money back. I miss the old arena. The arena is like one of the most fun things that I do when I stream or play an Iron Man, because the stakes are really high. Yeah, sure, you can back out, but you might also die before you get a chance to do that. Yeah, they need to bring back the arena, man. Seriously. Bring back the arena. I'm not even gonna attempt to pronounce this name, says the very first game was inspired by mythological Greece. Marth Marsh Pegasi, etc. And the other entries have gone into the mythology of different cultures. I'd like to see a full-on game set in Greek/Roman/Egyptian mythology. I think actually one of the things that made Fates feel very refreshing as a world, even though I didn't like the story much, was the fact that it was the first Fire Emblem game that actually had a Japanese aesthetic, or like an Asian aesthetic with like samurai and stuff like that. That's cool. They should delve more into that. I think Fire Emblem has a pretty strong identity. You know, when you think about Fire Emblem, you think about cute Pegasus girls, big buff armor knights, paladins, and they can all still be in the game. But I think what they did with Fates, with having Hor and Noshido, I almost said Nor and Hoshido, was very clever as a way to kind of introduce a different aesthetic to the game. Now, I have always advocated for, or for many years I've talked about how cool it would be to have kind of like an Arabian Nights style Fire Emblem, because there's so much cool mythology you could draw upon there. First of all, the dancers would finally make sense, because that's literally, I mean, that's where they come from. And I think just having things like genies, wizards on flying carpets, camel riders, stuff like that would be incredibly cool. I think it would fit incredibly well into a Fire Emblem style mythos. And it'd be nice to just see them take some chances. I feel like one of the problems I had with Engage is the fact that they didn't dare to kind of try something new. It was just back to the old, you know, and the new stuff that they did try felt kind of cringe and weird. So sometimes I think really going into another culture would be a very good way for the series to feel fresh. But of course, you would still have to introduce, or you have to include some of the more basic things like, you know, Pegasus Knights and Paladins and Armor Knights. You don't want it to feel too different from traditional Fire Emblem. Again, a mix of the old and new is the best way to go about it, I think. And the last comment I'll be reading in this video is from Red Shellman, and he says, better translation, get rid of the bad faith localizers. Amen, brother. Amen. Me too, man. Me too. Over the past, like, I don't know, 5-6 years, I have started to really resent localizers. Going and reading how they radically changed the story and how they changed certain characters, for no other reason than lol, we felt like it, or lol, we could, or just out of a fear to kind of trigger modern audiences, is really pissing me off. As a localizer, as a translator, your job should be to present the story as close to what the original writer intended. Your job is not to change the game or the story because you feel like it or because you think you can do it better. You are a translator. You are a messenger. You're here to bring the story to us in as faithful a manner as it was intended by the original creator. It's not about you. It's not about your ego. It's about giving us the game because we can't understand it in its original language because we don't speak Japanese. So you are the vessel in which we experience the story. And yet, we have so many localizers who feel they can do it better. Full of egos. You know, if you want to make a story, make your own damn game. Don't just come in and translate someone else's work and put your own little spin on it. That's so lazy. That's so lazy. I'm not going to call them parasites, but I'm tempted to, right? Obviously, not all localizers are like this. Okay, like I'm brushing with broad strokes here. I'm not saying every single localizer is like this, but it feels like at least the ones responsible for translating Fire Emblem falls into this category. Treehouse, the team that's been behind localizing, I think, almost every single modern Fire Emblem game, it feels like they go way too hard in changing characters because they just didn't like him. Goldmary from Engage is a great example of this. You know, they were like, oh, she can't talk about how she's putting on a few pounds because that might trigger some people on X, you know? Just keep her original character in. That's what she was intended to be like. Who are you to come in and change this character because you're afraid he or she might offend people? So I really hope that they stop using the same localizers time and time again. I'm not sure if changing the localization would have made the stories of Fates and Engage better received. I really don't know. Maybe they were awful in their original script as well. But surely it couldn't hurt, right? It couldn't hurt to at least try someone else. I just want someone whose main purpose it is to just translate the story as close to the original as possible. Someone who doesn't put their own politics or spin on everything that they do. I just want some new localizers, man. I wanna experience these games as they were intended to be experienced. In fact, sometimes I actually ask myself, maybe I should just learn Japanese so I can actually just go and play the games in their original form and see how different it would be for me to do that. But, ladies and gentlemen, yeah, that's those are going to be the comments that I'm going to be responding to now. There were many more. I'm sorry I couldn't get to all of them, but I don't want to make this video too long. Thank you so much. I'll probably do this again if you guys want to talk about some other topics. Always fun to just bring my audience into this and play off them. Kind of do this at the end of my streams with the Q&A, but it's also fun to just do it in a video format. So if you do enjoy this type of video, do give it a thumbs up, leave a comment, and you know, just if you want me to tackle any other issues, just leave it in the comment section, and if they get a lot of upvotes, I'll probably make another community post and we can do this again. Thank you so much for watching, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mengs, and I shall see you guys next time. Bye-bye.